Diplomacy with Iran at critical stage after nuclear watchdog report raises concern. Kerry concerned about viability of PA if Israel blocks funds. French Chief Rabbi says Paris attacks were a turning point in addressing growing anti-Semitism. And over 1,000 Muslims form human shield around Oslo synagogue. Shalom and welcome to the Jerusalem Post News. Here are the top stories for February 22nd. Negotiations between the US and Iran over its nuclear program are at a critical stage now as their top diplomats are meeting in Geneva this week. Aiming for a March 31st deadline for a political framework agreement, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and US Secretary of State John Kerry were set to meet today for yet another round of intensive talks. The US seeks a deal that would provide Iran with peaceful nuclear power while guaranteeing its program cannot be weaponized. But such guarantees would rely on verification measures enforced by the IAEA, which raised questions last week over Iran's willingness to comply. Meanwhile, in Washington, the Jerusalem Post learned that due to the row between Israel and the US over the Iranian issue, Kerry, US President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden are all expected to skip this year's APAC summit. The annual policy conference has received all three figures in the past. Kerry on Saturday expressed concern about the viability of the Palestinian Authority if it doesn't soon receive tax revenue which has been withheld by Israel.
If the Palestinian Authority ceases or were to cease security cooperation or even decide to disband as a result of their economic predicament, and that could happen in the near future if they don't receive additional revenues, then we would be faced with yet another crisis that could also greatly impact the security of both Palestinians and Israelis. And that would have the potential of serious ripple effects elsewhere in the region. So we're working hard to try to prevent that from happening. And that's why we've been reaching out to key stakeholders in order to express these concerns, but also to try to work together to be able to find a solution to this challenge.
The funds have been held back from the PA since last month in retaliation for Palestinian moves to join the International Criminal Court. The move would pave the way for the ICC to take jurisdiction over alleged crimes committed in Palestinian lands and to investigate the conduct of Israeli and Palestinian leaders. The Chief Rabbi of France, Haim Corsia, said Thursday that the January Paris attacks were a turning point in acknowledging growing anti-Semitism in the country. Rabbi Corsia made this remark while on a trip to New York City. He was speaking at the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan, where he was welcomed by Jewish community leaders and New York Mayor Bill de Blasio.
For too long, I witnessed that the sense of indifference of the French civil society to anti-Semitic and racist crimes. In the wake of a terrorist assault on Charlie Hebdo and the Hyper supermarket, the entire society finally arose to say no to the terrorists, no to muzzling freedom of speech and freedom of the press. I am well aware, though, that if Charlie Hebdo assault had not happened, I'm not sure that so many people was marched in the street.
It's our moment to say, we don't like this trend we see. We don't find it acceptable. We don't allow anyone to pass. Our allied nations in Europe bear responsibility for taking the kinds of steps that leave no doubt of their absolute commitment to defending their Jewish communities.
Meanwhile, in Oslo, a group of Muslims gave a show of support for Norway's Jews. More than 1,000 Muslims formed a human shield around Oslo's synagogue on Saturday, offering symbolic protection for the city's Jewish community and condemning an attack on a synagogue in nearby Denmark last weekend. The event was organised by Norwegian youth, and the 17-year-old organiser said the impetus behind it was the prejudice faced by Jews and Muslims on a daily basis.
You stand up for the free religion. And by myself, I'm a theological student, and I want to be here to mark my solidarity for the Jewish, the Muslim, and for everyone who can practice their religion.
I'm here to promote interfaith between the Jewish people and Muslim people, and to show everybody that we like get along, we live in peace, and this is what being human is all about, is getting along and being at peace with one another.
That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from Israel. Until then, shalom from the Jerusalem Post studios.